back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hi, and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and can be heard each week here live on the Inception Radio Network. A couple of quick announcements to make. If you didn't listen to the first hour of the show, I want to remind you that Brian Forster and Brian Forster has appeared on Ancient Aliens multiple times, and I are going to Peru, Mexico, South America, one of those countries down there where they speak Spanish. Anyway, we are going to check out a bunch of the megalithic sites down there and employ remote viewing. And so everyone that comes will be participating in an experiment in evaluating who our ancestors are using remote viewing. So please do check out the information and sign up for the tour and join us because it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get to touch elongated heads, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. Also, don't forget, sign up for our weekly newsletter at justenergyradio.com or like us on Facebook. Let's see, what else do I want to say? You can also check out Just Energy Radio on our YouTube channel, which is Just Energy Radio on YouTube. And I don't know. I don't feel like doing announcements. But let me tell you about our guest because I have like a gajillion questions, if that was a word, for him. And so we're going to be talking to Willam Brown. Willam Brown studies applied and theoretical resonance biophysics at the Resonance Project Institute. He explores all systems of knowledge from physics and biology to the nature of consciousness and describes his comprehensive synthesis in what he calls the science of universal life. Although his exploration of understanding is all-inclusive, Willam's professional background is in cellular and molecular biology. He has worked in numerous laboratory facilities all across the United States and has extensive experience in molecular biology research. So from Willam Brown, scienceoflife.com, Willam Brown. Hey, Willam, how are you?
Great, Dr. Rita. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, I am just so excited. You know, when I heard some of the topics that you speak on, I was like, I so have to get this guy on the show. But before we get into all the dirt, tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, how you got into, biology and physics and trying to get this synthesis together. What's that all about?
Well, I was kind of born as a scientist, really. From a very young age, I was just fascinated by astronomy, especially, and physics. And I spent most of my kind of adolescence studying and learning about that. And when I got to the college level, I had a pretty good background in that, but not much in biology, actually. And so here was this huge cosmological, macroscopic world that I was used to and very familiar with. And so when I went to my first kind of college-level biology class, here's this nanoscale, microscopic world, and it was like an entire new world to me. And I just became fascinated all over again and started spent the next 10 years actually studying that at the various universities across the country.
And here you are today.
Yes. and actually, to have made it to the Resonance Project Foundation, it took on another element, which was the idea of resonance and energy, almost kind of the unseen forces, even if you will, and how, those kind of subjects that are actually that scientists don't really like to go into very much. How do those actually affect, well, our scientific understanding, or even what can we learn from that?
Well, see, then I guess it's good that you're on a show called Just Energy because, we're all just energy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. See, you're on the second hour, so you didn't get to hear the whole show intro thing. So, you're a little bit out of a disadvantage there. But, I wanted to start talking about how life arose, on the planet. And, and I'm just going to throw something out there and then I'll let you comment, but there are the Darwinian people that say, a bolt of lightning struck some primordial ooze and poof, it became alive and organic and breathing, which I don't get. But then on the flip side, we have, and I'm sure you've heard this quote, but I'm just going to share it for the listeners, Sir Frederick Hoyle, who states, the chance of higher life forms might have emerged in this way, speaking about the primordial ooze theory, is comparable to the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. I love that quote. So what do you think happened? How do you think life on this planet started?
Oh, well,
and you can go wherever you need to go. So, no holds barred on this show.
Well, it's the quote from Hoyle is actually really the truth of the matter. And what it brings to light is that there is an ordering principle, a universal ordering principle to what we term evolution. And so the way that I describe it is not exclusive of any kind of philosophical or scientific theory on the matter. I think that each has brought good points to it, and each one has an element of truth to it, but I don't think that anyone's got it exactly right just yet, and I'm not saying that I have either. But I do have, actually, I'm doing a year-long lecture series for exobiology. And the first lecture is actually available online. It's called The Living Universe. It's at exouniversity.org. And I discussed this very topic. And it's actually over the course of 3 lectures, I present an entire model describing how life came to be on Earth, and even in a larger sense in the universe. Not that it's been absolutely verified that there is life elsewhere in the universe, but we kind of all know that there is. There's little doubt about that, and then especially taken with a lot of other evidence, it's pretty apparent that that is the case. But just going back to the origins of life on Earth, it's actually well known that from a number of different lines of evidence, lines of inquiry, that it's highly unlikely that life actually originated de novo or from primordial building blocks on Earth itself, such as in the primordial ooze theory, which is really kind of a theory that I don't think was given much serious thought because it doesn't take much of actually going through that case scenario to see how it doesn't make a lot of sense. But so some of those lines of evidence, even if you look at the extant molecular biology of present-day organisms, you can pretty much just from that almost ascertain that it's highly, highly unlikely or improbable that life originated on Earth itself. There's things like molecular clocks, especially in the genetic material like the genome. When you run this molecular clock, which is based on some assumptions, but for the most part, it kind of unambiguously shows that this universal genome that is present on Earth has to have a date at least 8 billion years old. So you look at the age of the Earth, it's 4.5. Yeah, it's half that age, 4.5 billion years old. And that's just one indication or clue, but there's many others. There's a couple of keystone molecules. They're actually nanomolecular biomachines, but they're the keystones of biological life and living organisms on Earth as we know it. And
can I interject a question?
Absolutely, please do.
So where I get stuck, I mean, there's the primordial ooze theory, but there's the whole concept. I mean, there's inorganic matter, so like the primordial ooze was just a bunch of stuff in a pond, and then there's organic life, which even if we're talking about a plant or a piece of blue-green algae, I mean, there's some form of consciousness. It needs to eat. It needs to excrete. It needs to have some kind of respiration, where if you're looking at a rock, it doesn't do any of those things. So, and I don't even know if you know the answer to this question, but any thoughts, and I mean, I'll take a thought, on how even that part happened or how it could happen?
Well, actually, that is kind of the underlying thesis of the science of universal life, actually. And what it is that we have this distinction, and it's a very ambiguous, almost nebulous distinction that biologists really struggle with, and that is we have living matter and non-living matter. We have organic molecules and that have been arranged, and once it has a certain level of system complexity, we call that life. And then inorganic molecules, which we posit or view as non-living. Now, if you look into a textbook for a definition of life or what it is to be alive, you won't find a definition. You'll find a list of characteristics which are useful, but you won't find a definition for what is life. And actually, I think that we can actually offer a definition for what life is. And that is the characteristic of being able to or actively processing, encoding, changing, and transducing information, transmitting information. It's information processes, really. And this is epitomized by life in living systems. And that's one of the reasons why they are so different to our perception from inorganic matter, is because they have a high energy requirement for the amazing information processes occurring within their ordered system. Now, so the point of this is that within the universe, living systems do not come from non-living systems. Living processes, rather, arise from living processes. And so, when we think of the inorganic molecules, or even the organic molecules that are the precursors to the building blocks of living systems, biological organisms, their behavior actually has an underlying ordering principle, an underlying order that is directing their evolution or behavior in an intelligent fashion. It's this intelligence that is actually within the very fabric of our universe. And so, it's a living universe, and through. And so, there's almost a driving force that is influencing or directing matter and energy to come together in more and more ordered and sophisticated ways, more and more complex ways, to increase that intelligence, increase that information exchange. And so this kind of again goes back to where did life come from? Well, it's universal.
So could this be kind of like, we're talking about God? I mean, for kind of a lack of a better word, because there are some people that have the belief that, God's some guy sitting over there, white hair, beard, got the nice chair, and then there's this whole other group that believe, everything is God and we are just part of God, and God is this conscious, God is, I've had Amit Goswami, who I'm sure come on and talk about like intelligent design, and that's kind of his angle. Do you ascribe to that same kind of thought? I use the God word because there's not really anything that's so all-encompassing, even though, a lot of people get turned off because you say God. But
yeah, well, and also what can happen is that it's very quickly almost reduced in a sense to he's just saying God did it. and what can happen is it turns people, well, scientists especially, it turns them off from taking a real actual scientific investigation of it, in that it is in a sense a mechanistic process. There is a mechanism to it, and it can be understood in a scientific fashion and actually be used to explain some big questions that we're really struggling with at the moment, like the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the nature of consciousness. And so this underlying intelligence, this underlying order, you could call it God, but I really view myself, that concept, as being much larger than even this. This is really, it has some of those aspects. It's universal in scope. It's sentient, cognizant. It's directed with a purpose, but I guess I would say that it doesn't necessitate that definition. It doesn't necessarily have to be associated with the concept of a being or a god.
Oh, and I wasn't using it as the being term, even though that's what, most people jump right there, which is why I hesitate in using that word, but
Because myself, I'm really more of a pantheist. For me, the concept of God is all things. Yes, myself. So I personally have no trouble with saying, sure, God. But
right. Well, me either, but in that big universal way, not in the guy sitting in the chair with the white hair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I only used that with my kids when they were asking questions that were way too hard, and then they would ask a question about the question, and you ran out of answers, and it's like, God,
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask God.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you believe, or research is indicating that life is at least, and I could see where this might be a little short-sighted, but it's okay. Like 8 billion years old, which would infer that it existed prior to the development of our solar system. So do you go with the whole Panspermia idea?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so, even one step further, actually. So, with some of my own theories on it as well.
Go for it.
Okay.
I really want to hear your theories. I read a lot, so it's like, come on, I want to hear what you have to say.
Excellent. So, it is most likely, based on the evidence, what has been observed and what we know, that it is a mechanism of panspermia, from which life was seeded onto the primordial earth from elsewhere, and it came here probably almost really like very highly evolved, with at least 4 to 5 billion years of evolution having been taken place. But there's also, if you look at the likelihood of a random event of panspermia, it's actually very unlikely. That is that, it didn't arise on Earth, it arose on another terrestrial body in another solar system 4 or 5 billion years before Earth even came about. You still have the question, how did it arise on that planet? And again, that's this ordering principle that actually is directed towards the formation of greater complexity within matter. But say this terrestrial body in another solar system has developed organisms, like simple organisms like bacteria, and upon the death of that solar system, solar systems can last for a number of different lifespans, but say it was about 4 or 5 billion years, and the solar system ended with a explosion of the central sun, the star. It would have ejected out material from that planet, and this is there's radiation pressure from the star that pushes it out of the dying solar system, so to speak. Now, this ejected material is being pushed along by radiation from that star, and it's harboring the life forms inside it. They can exist. This has been empirically validated. They can exist for millions of years in kind of a hypostasis, especially as endospores, and even more so if they're sheltered within this rocky material. Say it's like a comet. Now, the problem is that it's very unlikely for that comet to traverse the interstellar space, which is a long voyage, and come to basically intercept Earth, the primordial Earth. It's like a pinpoint of light in the vastness of space. It's very unlikely and improbable for this kind of dissemination to occur. And this was actually one of the arguments put forth by Dr. Crick, one of the co-discoverers of the conformation of DNA. Actually, he, over the course of 30 years, founded the core concepts of molecular biology. He had a great depth of understanding into molecular biology, and that understanding led him to not only say that life didn't originate on Earth most likely, but that it originated through panspermia. And given the unlikely probability of a random event of panspermia, he actually wrote a paper called Directed Panspermia. He wrote it out of Cambridge University, in which, given a lot of these arguments, he posited that it could very well have been an intelligent civilization that evolved on another terrestrial planet in another solar system, which took life and directly seeded it onto Earth, purposefully seeded it onto Earth.
Right. Wait a minute. Back up. Say that statement again. Who purposely seeded it onto Earth?
A intelligent civilization.
I love you. I love you. I have to tell you, that's the theory that I have a new book that came out. All right, I'm going to plug my book since I didn't do it in the little info thing at the beginning, called Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods. And that was the theory that I came out with, was that these extraterrestrial gods came and terraformed the planet by bringing life to Earth.
Well, the scientific evidence is actually in your favor.
Do, 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 do. So I knew I was going to love you.
I have to get that book myself. This sounds fascinating. Yeah.
Okay, so intentionally, see, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just like, wait. Yeah, because one of the things that didn't make sense, that you were saying a little bit earlier, was that on some planet, this early bacteria formed, and I'm like, dude, they had 4 billion years. I would hope that it would be better than like a June bug, and it could be more than just bacteria that evolved. I mean, it didn't take us, well, all right, it did take us 4 billion years, but look at where we are. You know?
Yeah, and but there is certain considerations that need to be made even in that case, such as, all right, it's an actual good possibility that life was intentionally seeded on Earth by an intelligent civilization, and that Earth was terraformed, and that most likely, if that was the case, life would have been kind of directed throughout its evolutionary process here on Earth.
I'm loving you even more.
Now, again, there is evidence for this as well, especially biochemical evidence for this, especially within the genome. But there is kind of an opportune moment at which you would want a life to go onto the course to bring about higher intelligent beings. So just taking the Earth's history as an example, it is actually a really, really chaotic place for the last 3 billion years. Asteroid collisions, meteor collisions, the volcanoes, ice ages, etc. It wasn't a very actually benevolent place, a very hospitable place for a civilization to exist on. So I just bring that up because just because it was 4 billion years for us to emerge on Earth, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the amount of time it takes for an intelligent civilization to come about. It's possible that on other solar systems and other terrestrial bodies, before the formation of the Earth, the conditions were much more hospitable, where an intelligent civilization could actually have evolved and emerged more rapidly than it did on Earth, even. So, but even then, not even taking that assumption into account, they still had 4 billion years or more, 4 to 5 billion years to come about. So it's
well, and that's only if you dated at 8 billion, which, it could be even older than that.
It's possible. What we see is, kind of based on the models, really, that we have. They put an age for the universe at about 13.5 billion years.
Yeah, but they just made that up.
Well, that's definitely not the beginning of the universe. But it does seem to be a very good probability that was the beginning of something. That there was an event that kind of put a large amount of energy into more of a material form. And based on that model, terrestrial bodies don't really come about until about 3.5 billion years into that process, which is about 10 billion years ago. So based on that current model, we have a kind of rough estimate of the age for terrestrial bodies at about 10 billion years. I think that's a good, actually, approximation. Although it's not the end of the story by any means, because there was certainly something that existed before what they call the Big Bang. So, it's an open investigation, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to not really change topics totally, but I want to totally fast forward in time because we only have finite time, and there's another topic that I got to talk to you about. It's imperative. Okay. So one of the things, because you're a molecular biologist and you look at genetic stuff, and, one of the things, and I'll share what is in my book, I talk about how, and I'm being very generous in my book because I don't really want to step on people's toes with my dating and my commentary too much because I step on them everywhere else. But anyway, and I talk about how it seems unlikely, based on the genetic record and the idea of evolution and natural selection, that Homo habilis and, Australopithecines, that were just barely walking upright in less than, 2 million years could be basically relatively modern men, going from barely walking upright to being hairless and being able to communicate and being able to use advanced tools and have knowledge of fire and have culture and have, basic civilization and have all of this stuff, based on how it took 7 million years for us to have the ability to speak. And then poof, it just happened spontaneously because it was a miracle. We love miracles on this show. But can you talk to that point because I think you bring some really valid scientific material to the table on that topic. Please.
It does seem to be pretty punctuated and rapid, the emergence of Homo sapiens from that kind of primordial ancestor. And actually, within the evolutionary paradigm, the evolutionary theory, there's really no explanation for what kind of natural selection pressures could drive this kind of rather extreme emergence or adaptation towards higher and higher intelligence so rapidly and in such a manner. It's not described, it's not explained. It's kind of a big unknown that none of the biologists or scientists want to go to. They say, well, something, some natural selective process drove it. But if you look at the genetics of, the primate lineage, which we're a part of, and specifically look at the human genome, there is actually molecular evidence that shows that it very well could have not been just a purely natural event occurring purely through natural selection processes. In fact, it looks like it's kind of quite the opposite of that for a number of reasons. But what I think I've identified within the human genome is a genetic element that could have, well, most probably did, drive this evolution that drove this emergence of humans to a high degree, and that in fact this genetic element has characteristics of being engineered. I don't believe that it's a purely natural, naturally occurring genetic element within the human genome. And there's a number of reasons why this is the case. But in essence, what looks like to me to have happened, based on the extant molecular evidence within the human genome and the evolutionary kind of history that we can deduce from our closest relatives, it looks like there was a genetic element that was inserted into one of these primordial kind of hominids, such as Australopithecus, that it was inserted in, probably along with other genetic elements, other DNA, to actually, again, direct the evolution and emergence, punctuated, kind of like, very quickly, directed into the emergence of the human species. And this isn't, another a far stretch from what has been occurring all along the evolutionary history of life on Earth from its inception. This directed seeding and directed evolution towards higher intelligence by another intelligent civilization. And one of the things that a number of scientists have admitted, mainstream scientists, even skeptics of this idea, they all, for the most part, concede that this is a good possibility. This model, but because we're trying to validate this scientifically, there must be some kind of biochemical signature within us or other living organisms that we could point to that would actually be the physical evidence for this theory. And this genetic element, I believe, it is that molecular signature, that evidence that actually the emergence of the human species was a process of intervention and intelligently directed design process, essentially. And I can get into what that genetic element is.
Yes, please. I mean, I have one other question that I want to get to, but I don't think it's that long. So maybe spend, I don't know, like 5-8 minutes keeping going, because this is what I want to hear. and because it's important, because people sit there like myself and put out these theories. I mean, mine is based on the mythological record, and there's only some people like you that are emerging saying, no, look, it's here. The information's here. And so the more you can put out there to, just kind of really knock it down and put it out there so it's on the record, I'd appreciate it.
Well, because the truth of the matter is that, these things are by no means fully figured out, fully delineated. That's how it's presented, from the scientific community. Within the media, it's presented that, no, we've got this all figured out. This is how it is. There's no questions left. When in fact, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of unexplained things in the genome and the evolutionary history. There's so many things that are completely unexplained within the mainstream theories and even some of the not so mainstream theories. So, this is actually, that's how I came to, that's one of the main ways I came about a lot of this, is trying to answer some of these questions I had that aren't being answered by our present theories, to expand on them and update them. But so this genetic element, it's called technically, its technical name is an allu retrotransposon. And there's probably a handful of people who have ever heard that kind of terminology before, but it's probably more commonly known as within the class of jumping genes or mobile genetic elements. These are, as the name implies, mobile genetic elements that make up a significant portion of the genomes of so-called higher organisms or multicellular complex organisms. But they're not well understood, to say the least, within molecular biology. In fact, in one of my classes during my PhD thesis, so this is a graduate level class in cellular and molecular biology, I was one of only a few of the students that knew what a retrotransposon was in a room full of geneticists. It was kind of pretty astounding, actually. But this particular one, the allu retrotransposon, again, this is a class of genetic elements that make up 50% of the human genome. Gene coding regions, by comparison, make up 1% of the human genome. So this is a very significant and important factor in our genetics. But the allele retrotransposon is unique in that it is only expressed within the human genome. It's only expressed within the human being. There are similar type elements that are found in our closest relatives, other hominids, primates, that is. But it's dormant. It's not active. It hasn't been for a long time. Probably when it was active was around the time that it was inserted into our ancestor to make the human being. That's another thing about this.
All right, let me ask just a real, very little teeny question. So you're saying it's in hominids, but do we find that same gene in like horses or cows or that same thing?
No, only in our closest relatives, and it's only
interesting. Okay, got it. Okay, continue.
It's so, it's only active in human beings, and specifically, it's most active in the brain. So, why do humans have such a actually disproportionately large brain compared to their body size? It's 7 times the proportion of what it should be compared to our body mass. Well, why? What drove our brains to be so big? Why are our brains so big? It's this genetic element. In fact, during when it was first inserted, it jumped into a gene that codes for a surface glycoprotein. These are just molecular biology terms nobody needs to be concerned with. But it jumped into this gene, and when it did so, it actually, by doing this, it allowed instantaneously, or consequently, I should say, the emergence of a larger brain. This gene is one of the braking mechanisms on brain size.
So is that MHPH gene?
Oh, this is the it's this. I think it's CNP, acetylneuramidic gene. It's kind of hard to pronounce without it having the name for it. Yeah, neuroaminitic gene.
You could just say the letters because there's no way I'd ever repeat it.
Basically, it produces an enzyme that makes sialic acid that's a coating along many cells, such as neuronal cells, neurons, in most other organisms. But again, this was knocked out, so to say. Really, more accurately, it was turned off or disabled by this engineered genetic element, the allele retrotransposon, and this directly resulted in larger brain size. But this is just one of a vast number of functions of this genetic element. It does so much. It's really unbelievable. Its versatility, its functionality, and the implications of this genetic element, actually. It ties back in to that idea that I was kind of getting at on the timing, on the synchronization of evolution here on Earth. That, I believe this intelligent civilization, it's, are we doing okay on time to get into this?
Not really.
Oh, all right.
I'm just going to have you back. How's
Okay.
that? And we can get into it more because either that or I just need to come to Hawaii with the tape recorder and just pick your brain. One or the other. I don't know. So, because I have one other question that it's been driving me crazy all day, and I want to ask you because you're talking about brain size, and it kind of ties in. And I'm good friends with Brian Forrester, who does a lot of work with the elongated skulls in Peru. And some of them don't look. They don't look natural. They don't look like somebody took a couple of boards and squished their heads together. And so, but they're how different? I mean, because how different can we be genetically to have something like, an increased cranium, but still, quote unquote, register as being human? See, hard questions.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
I mean, because, for example, and I didn't write her name down. They just got some genetic results about Bigfoot, and Bigfoot is showing out as being partially human or human. I have not read the paper. And so, it's kind of like, okay, but Bigfoot obviously is not human.
And it's a little bit difficult to answer just kind of straightforward because there's a lot of even misunderstandings, I guess, that would have to kind of be addressed initially. So how close would it have to be genetically? You're saying to be...
Right, so, if they do a DNA test, and these things show up as being human, but, could there be a couple of genetic abnormalities, genetics that were inserted or whatever that would make them be different?
Uh-huh.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, yes, yeah. And so we could definitely identify kind of markers that would indicate that there was genetic changes, that there are genetic differences that are indicative that they're not entirely human. So that's very well, that could very well be the case. That is kind of it's a difficult approach to take, but even Lloyd Pye, are you familiar with him?
Right. I mean, him and Brian have worked together on several things.
Okay. Well, even he's identified a variant of a very specific, human-specific gene within the Star Child skull that makes it strongly indicative that this isn't what we would term a member of the human species.
Okay.
But there is, though, this other aspect, which is there's the universal genome. And I mean that actually in the kind of the literal sense. If you were to, well, this has been done actually, compare the genomes of humans and dolphins. This was done and was found that actually the human dolphin is identical to, I'm sorry, the dolphin genome is identical to the human genome. It's nearly identical. The only difference is that it's been rearranged. All of these kind of segments, genes, they come in cassettes, little modules. They're all there, and they're all the same. They've just been rearranged. They have a different sequence and order along the chromosomes within dolphins. And, there's pretty vast anatomical differences between the two species. So it's kind of, it's an interesting topic.
All right, all right, hang on. So actually closer than, like a chimpanzee, even though it's mixed up, or Not that close.
Uh, Not quite as close for a couple of reasons. But I would say it's about the same as a chimpanzee in comparison to a human. They're about the same. Now, this actually is very interesting because if you actually do some of the comparisons of the physiology and anatomy of the human and dolphin, there's some pretty striking actual similarities. Now for one, if you look at these...
Hey, William.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Don't hate me, but the music's going to come up here in a second. Like I said, I'm just going to have you on, and I would love to talk to you just even off air because you have information I need.
Well, you can always come out to Hawaii, too. It's a fun trip.
Okay, that sounds good. Anyway, I am going to let you go. Thank you for coming on, Willam Brown, WillamBrownScienceOfLife.com. And next week, we have Keith Age coming on talking about inside spooky Waverly Hills. And then in the second hour, Charlotte Zivak talking about talking with animals. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. Thank you all for tuning in, and be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser